Comment where you're watching from today, as we share a story that will remind you of the power of human connection. On a chilly February morning in Los Angeles, while most people hurried past without a second glance, Shaquille O'Neal noticed something different about the homeless man sitting outside the local convenience store. It wasn't the worn Lakers jersey the man was wearing. Plenty of people in LA wore Lakers gear. It wasn't even the weathered cardboard sign beside him. It was the glimpse of purple and gold ink on his forearm that caught Shaq's attention. William Anderson had been living on the streets of Los Angeles for 8 months. Once a successful construction worker, a series of unfortunate events had left him with nothing but his pride and an unwavering love for the Lakers. Even in his darkest moments, he refused to part with the Lakers tattoo he'd gotten 20 years ago, back when life was different, back when he had a home, a family, and hope. The morning had started like any other for William. He'd woken up early, carefully folded his blanket, and made his way to his usual spot. Most people walked past, avoiding eye contact, treating him like he was invisible. He'd grown used to it, but it didn't make it hurt any less. Each person who looked through him was a reminder of how far he had fallen. Robert Thompson, the convenience store owner, was one of the few people who showed William kindness. Every morning, he'd bring out a cup of coffee and sometimes a breakfast sandwich. "You're looking sharp today, William," Robert would say, treating him with dignity when most others wouldn't. This morning was no different, except for the fact that Robert seemed excited about something. "You know who's been coming around here lately?" Robert had asked, handing William his usual coffee. "He's been visiting the neighborhood, doing some community work." William had smiled politely, remembering the games he used to watch, back when he could afford tickets to see the Lakers play. Back when Shaq was dominating the court, making Los Angeles proud. What William didn't know was that Shaquille O'Neal had indeed been spending more time in this part of LA, working quietly on various community projects. He'd learned about the growing homeless population in the area and had been looking for ways to make a difference. But he wasn't expecting to find such a powerful connection on this particular morning. As Shaq's SUV pulled up to the convenience store, heads turned. Even after all these years, his presence commanded attention. But Shaq wasn't thinking about the attention. He was thinking about something his mother had told him years ago: success means nothing if you don't use it to lift others up. William hadn't even noticed the SUV at first. He was too busy trying to stay warm, rubbing his hands together in the morning chill. The Lakers jersey he wore, a prized possession from better days, provided little protection against the cold. But he wore it anyway, a reminder of happier times, of the passion for basketball that had once brought so much joy to his life. When the shadow fell across him, William assumed it was just another person passing by. He kept his eyes down, maintaining the invisible barrier that separated him from the world of the fortunate. But then something unusual happened. The shadow stopped moving. And a voice he'd heard countless times on TV but never expected to hear in person, spoke to him. "That's a nice jersey you got there, brother." William looked up, and for a moment he thought he was dreaming. Standing before him was Shaquille O'Neal, larger than life, looking at him not through him. But it wasn't the jersey that had caught Shaq's attention. It was the tattoo, faded but still clear, of the Lakers logo on William's forearm. The few people on the street that early morning stopped to watch the scene unfold. Linda Miller, walking to her job at the nearby diner, paused mid-step. Michael Johnson, out for his morning jog, slowed to a stop. They could sense they were about to witness something extraordinary. "How long have you had that tattoo?" Shaq asked, crouching down to William's level, despite how uncomfortable it must have been for someone of his size. The simple act of meeting William eye to eye, of treating him as an equal, was enough to bring tears to William's eyes. 20 years, William replied, his voice rough from lack of use. "Got it the year you won your first championship with us." His hands trembled as he pulled up his sleeve to show the full tattoo, not just the Lakers logo, but the year 2000 beneath it, commemorating that first championship of the Shaq and Kobe era. Robert Thompson watched from the store doorway as Shaq asked William about the tattoo, about his story, about how he ended up here. And William, who had grown used to being invisible, found himself sharing everything. He told Shaq about losing his construction job after an injury, about the medical bills that drained his savings, about his family falling apart under the strain. But more than that, he talked about basketball. About how watching the Lakers had given him hope during dark times. About how he used to save up for months to buy tickets to one game a season. About how, even now, he would sometimes stand outside sports bars, catching glimpses of games through the windows. As William talked, something changed in Shaq's expression. Those who knew him well would have recognized it, the look he got when he was about to do something big, something meaningful. But this time, it wasn't about basketball. It was about something much more important. Patricia Harris, who worked at the cafe across the street, had come out to witness the scene. She'd seen William every day for months, had sometimes brought him leftover pastries, but had never heard him speak so much. She could see the change in him as he talked to Shaq. The way he sat up straighter, the way his eyes lit up when discussing basketball. What happened next would be talked about in the neighborhood for years to come. Shaq didn't just listen to William's story. He didn't just offer a handshake and some kind words. Instead, he saw something in William that reminded him of his own journey, of the people who had believed in him when he needed it most. "You know what, brother?" Shaq said, reaching into his pocket. "That tattoo tells me something about you. It tells me you're loyal. It tells me you don't give up. And right now, you don't need a handout, you need a hand up." The next few moments seemed to unfold in slow motion. Shaq pulled out his phone and made a call. Then another. And another. With each call, William's future began to shift, though he didn't know it yet. What he did know was that, for the first time in months, someone was seeing him, really seeing him, as a person, not just another homeless man on the streets of LA. Karen Williams, who had been walking her dog, stopped to record the scene on her phone. But she didn't post it online immediately. Something about the moment felt too pure, too genuine for social media. This wasn't about viral fame or getting likes. This was about human connection in its purest form. As the morning wore on, more people gathered to witness the interaction. Joseph Robinson, a local high school basketball coach, arrived at the convenience store for his morning coffee and found himself frozen in place, watching as one of basketball's greatest legends showed what true greatness looks like off the court. But for William, the growing crowd didn't matter. What mattered was that someone had taken the time to stop, to listen, to care. The Lakers tattoo that had been a reminder of better days was now becoming a bridge to a better future, though he didn't know it yet. Robert Thompson, still watching from his doorway, remembered something his father used to say: "Sometimes angels wear jerseys instead of wings." Looking at Shaq talking to William, treating him with such genuine respect and interest, Robert couldn't help but think how true those words were. The morning sun had risen fully now, casting long shadows across the street. But William no longer felt the cold. Something was warming him from the inside, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not just the fleeting kind that comes with a hot meal or a warm blanket, but the lasting kind that comes with knowing someone believes in you. As Shaq stood up, his knees cracking slightly from having crouched for so long, he looked at William with determination in his eyes. "Tomorrow's going to be different," he said. "You ready for that?" William nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He didn't know what Shaq meant exactly, but he felt the weight of the moment. Something was about to change. The Lakers tattoo on his arm, which had been a connection to his past, was about to become a bridge to his future. The people watching couldn't have known what would happen next, how this chance encounter would spiral into something much bigger, something that would remind everyone who heard about it that sometimes the smallest connections can lead to the biggest changes. Let us know in the comments. Have you ever had a random encounter that changed your life? Sometimes the most meaningful moments come when we least expect them. What happened next would prove that sometimes the biggest miracles start with the smallest connections. As Shaq walked back to his SUV, he wasn't just making plans, he was making promises. And Shaquille O'Neal was known for keeping his promises. That same morning, Michael Davis, the manager of a local construction company, received an unexpected call. The voice on the other end was unmistakable. "I've got a guy with 20 years of construction experience who needs a chance," Shaq explained. "He's down on his luck, but sometimes that's when people need an opportunity the most." Meanwhile, Barbara Williams, who ran a transitional housing program, was reviewing her waiting list when her phone rang. Within minutes, she was rearranging schedules and making space for an emergency placement. She'd worked with Shaq's foundation before and knew that when he personally called about someone, it was important. Back at the convenience store, William Anderson was still trying to process what had happened. Robert Thompson, the store owner, had brought him another cup of coffee and watched as the man who had been invisible to so many for so long was suddenly the center of attention. "You know," Robert said, sitting down beside William on the curb, "I've been watching people walk past you for months. But sometimes it just takes one person to see you, really see you, to change everything." William nodded, his hands wrapped around the warm cup, his Lakers tattoo catching the morning light. Linda Hernandez, a regular customer at the store, stopped to share her own story with William. "My brother was homeless for 3 years," she told him. "All it took was one person believing in him. Sometimes that's all anyone needs." Her words carried the weight of personal experience, of understanding how thin the line could be between stability and struggle. By noon, things started happening with unexpected speed. Thomas Johnson, one of Shaq's assistants, arrived with fresh clothes and supplies. But more importantly, he brought paperwork, forms for ID replacement, job applications, and housing programs. The invisible barriers that had kept William trapped in his situation were being dismantled one by one. "The Lakers tattoo," Thomas said as he helped William fill out the forms. "Shaq saw that as a sign of loyalty, of perseverance. He said anyone who keeps faith through hard times deserves a chance to rebuild." William's hands trembled as he signed his name, the first time he'd signed anything in months. Karen Miller, a social worker who had been called in to help, was amazed at how quickly things were moving. "Usually, these processes take weeks, sometimes months," she explained to Patricia Harris, who had brought over sandwiches from her cafe. "But when someone like Shaq gets involved, doors open." But it wasn't just about opening doors. It was about helping William walk through them. Richard Wilson, a local barber, offered his services free of charge. "Looking good is feeling good," he said as he gave William his first proper haircut in months. "And feeling good is the first step to doing good." As the day progressed, more people from the community started stepping forward to help. Jennifer Thompson, who taught at the local adult education center, offered to help William update his construction certifications. "Sometimes it's not just about getting back on your feet," she said. "It's about coming back stronger." By late afternoon, William had changed into clean clothes, gotten his haircut, and was sitting in Barbara Williams' office at the Transitional Housing Center. The Lakers jersey he'd been wearing was carefully folded in a bag, still precious, but no longer his only possession of value. "You know," Barbara said as she showed him to his temporary room, "Shaq told me something interesting when he called. He said your tattoo reminded him that loyalty isn't just about the good times. It's about keeping faith even when things are tough." The room was small but clean, with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out over the city. For William, who had been sleeping on concrete for months, it felt like a palace. But more than the physical comfort, it was the dignity of having a door he could close, a space he could call his own, that brought tears to his eyes. David Brown, another resident at the center, welcomed William with a firm handshake. "We've all got our stories," he said. "But what matters is where we're going, not where we've been." David had been at the center for 3 months and was already working again, proof that change was possible. As evening approached, Michael Davis arrived at the center to meet William. The construction manager sat down with him, not just to talk about job opportunities, but to listen to William's experience in the industry. 20 years of experience doesn't disappear just because life gets tough, Michael said. "We can work with that." The job interview turned into a lengthy discussion about construction techniques, safety protocols, and project management. William's knowledge was still sharp, his passion for the work still evident. Michael found himself taking notes, impressed by some of the innovative solutions William had developed over his years in the field. "You start Monday," Michael said finally. "It's not charity, we need someone with your experience. But first, you need to get settled, get your certifications updated. We'll hold the position." It was another promise, another thread in the web of support being woven around William. Back at his convenience store, Robert Thompson was telling customers about what he'd witnessed that morning. You know what the amazing thing was? He said to Elizabeth Moore, a regular customer. It wasn't just about Shaq being generous. It was about him seeing the person behind the circumstance. Word was starting to spread through the neighborhood. Sandra Johnson, who ran a local news blog, came by to interview Robert about what had happened. But she found herself writing about more than just Shaq's act of kindness. She was writing about how one moment of connection had inspired an entire community to action. As night fell, William sat on the edge of his bed, running his fingers over the Lakers tattoo that had sparked this extraordinary day. Joseph Martin, the center's security guard, stopped by to check on him. You know, Joseph said, I've worked here for 5 years, seen a lot of people come through. But I've never seen someone's life change quite this fast. But the change wasn't just in the practical things, the room, the job opportunity, the fresh clothes. The real change was in William's eyes. The hopelessness that had dulled them for so long was gone, replaced by something that had been missing for months: purpose. In his SUV, driving home, Shaq made another call. This time it was to his mother, the person who had taught him about the importance of lifting others up. Remember what you always told me? He said. Sometimes the biggest impacts come from the smallest moments of connection. The story was beginning to ripple outward. Mark Wilson, a local basketball coach, used it as a teaching moment for his team. It's not about how many points you score, he told them. It's about how many lives you touch. That's what real greatness looks like. Dorothy Thompson, who had been recording the day's events in her journal, wrote something profound. Today I witnessed a miracle. Not the kind with flashing lights and fanfare, but the quiet kind that happens when someone chooses to see the humanity in another person. As the neighborhood settled into night, the impact of the day's events continued to resonate. Anthony Garcia, the night clerk at the convenience store, noticed more customers stopping to talk to the homeless people they usually ignored. Small acts of kindness were sprouting like seeds after rain. In his room at the center, William finally allowed himself to truly rest for the first time in months. The Lakers tattoo on his arm had been a reminder of better days, but now it was something more. A symbol of how unexpected connections could change lives. Barbara Williams, finishing up her paperwork for the day, made a note in William's file. Sometimes it's not about the size of the gesture, but about the dignity it restores. Today, a basketball legend reminded us that the greatest assists happen off the court. The day was ending, but its impact was just beginning. In homes across the neighborhood, people were sharing the story, reminding each other that sometimes the most powerful changes start with the simplest acts of recognition. Let us know in the comments. When was the last time someone saw your potential when others didn't? Sometimes the greatest gifts we can give each other are belief and opportunity. 1 week after the morning that changed everything, William Anderson stood in front of the mirror in his transitional housing room, adjusting his new work shirt. The Lakers tattoo on his arm was partially visible beneath the sleeve, a reminder of how a symbol of his past had become a bridge to his future. Betty Moore, one of the housing center's counselors, knocked on his door with excitement. "There's someone here to see you," she said, her smile suggesting this wasn't just any visitor. William followed her to the common room, where Shaq waited, filling the space with his presence just as he used to fill the paint on the basketball court. "Ready for your first day?" Shaq asked, though he already knew the answer. He could see it in William's stance, in the way he carried himself now. This wasn't the same man who had been sitting outside the convenience store a week ago. This was someone who had reclaimed his dignity, his purpose. Michael Davis, the construction company manager, had arrived early to pick William up for his first day. But this wasn't just about starting a job. Michael had spent the past week working with Jennifer Thompson from the Adult Education Center, creating a plan that would allow William to update his certifications while working. "You know what impressed me most about your experience?" Michael said as they drove to the site. "It's not just the technical skills, it's how you manage to innovate even with limited resources. We need that kind of thinking." William nodded, remembering the creative solutions he'd developed over his 20 years in construction. At the construction site, Richard Anderson, the site supervisor, was waiting to introduce William to the team. "Shaq called me personally about you," Richard said. "But it's not his recommendation that matters now, It's what you do with this opportunity. The other workers who had heard William's story welcomed him with respect rather than pity. Thomas Wilson, a veteran foreman, took William under his wing. "We've all faced our struggles," he said during their first break. "What matters is how we build from here." Meanwhile, back at the convenience store, Robert Thompson had noticed something remarkable. The spot where William used to sit hadn't remained empty. Instead, it had become a kind of informal community help center. People who had walked past the homeless for years were now stopping to talk, to listen, to help. Linda Miller, who had witnessed Shaq's initial interaction with William, had started bringing extra sandwiches from her diner each morning. "It's not just about feeding people," she explained to Patricia Harris, who had joined her efforts. "It's about showing them they're not invisible." The story had begun spreading beyond the neighborhood. Sandra Johnson's blog post about the encounter had been picked up by larger news outlets. But what caught people's attention wasn't just Shaq's involvement, it was how one act of kindness had sparked a wave of community action. Karen Williams, the social worker who had helped with William's case, found herself fielding calls from other organizations wanting to create similar rapid response programs for homeless individuals. "What Shaq showed us," she explained, "is that sometimes we make helping too complicated. Sometimes it's as simple as seeing someone's potential." At the construction site, William was proving Michael Davis's faith in him was well placed. His experience showed in every task he tackled, and his attitude inspired those around him. Joseph Robinson, a younger worker, found himself learning not just about construction, but about resilience from William's example. Barbara Williams at the Transitional Housing Center had started using William's story when talking to new residents. "Sometimes the universe sends us signs in unexpected ways," she would say. "Who would have thought a Lakers tattoo would change someone's life?" By lunchtime, William had already impressed his new co-workers with his knowledge and work ethic. Elizabeth Garcia, the project coordinator, overheard him explaining an efficient new technique to some of the younger workers. "That's exactly why we needed someone with your experience," she said. Back at the center, Dorothy Thompson was organizing a new program inspired by William's story. The Talent Bank, she called it, a way to identify and showcase the skills of homeless individuals seeking employment. "Everyone has something valuable to offer," she explained. "Sometimes they just need someone to recognize it." The impact continued to ripple outward. Mark White, a local business owner, had started working with the center to create job opportunities for other residents. "What Shaq did wasn't just about helping one person," he said. "It was about showing us all what's possible when we stop looking past people." William's former spot outside the convenience store had transformed into something unexpected. Robert Thompson had placed a small table there, with a sign reading, "Need help? Let's talk." Every morning, people from the community would gather, sharing resources, connections, and opportunities. Susan Jackson, a regular customer at the store, had witnessed this transformation. "It's like that spot has become sacred," she explained. "It reminds us that everyone deserves a chance to be seen, to be heard, to be helped." As the afternoon wore on, William took his second break of the day. Sitting on a stack of lumber, he rolled up his sleeve to look at the Lakers tattoo. Thomas Wilson sat down beside him. "You know," Thomas said, "sometimes our hardest times become our greatest testimonies." The construction site had become more than just a workplace for William. It was a place where his experience was valued, where his past struggles weren't held against him, where he could rebuild not just buildings, but his life. Michael Davis watched from his office window, seeing how naturally William fit into the team. Word of William's progress had reached Shaq, who was planning something special. He had seen how one moment of connection had sparked a movement of compassion in the community. But he wasn't done yet. The Lakers tattoo that had caught his attention was about to become part of an even bigger story. Nancy Martinez, a local journalist, had been following William's story closely. "What strikes me," she wrote in her column, "is how something as simple as a tattoo became a symbol of human connection, of hope, of transformation. It reminds us that we all carry marks of our loyalty, our passions, our struggles, and sometimes these very marks become our salvation." At the Adult Education Center, Jennifer Thompson was working with other teachers to develop a program that would help people update their professional certifications while working. William's situation showed us the gaps in our system, she explained. Now we're fixing them. The construction company's weekly meeting had taken on a new tone. Michael Davis used it as an opportunity to discuss how they could create more opportunities for people rebuilding their lives. Talent doesn't disappear when someone hits hard times, he reminded his managers. Sometimes it just needs a chance to shine again. As the workday drew to a close, William gathered his tools, his movements sure and practiced. Richard Anderson approached him with news. "The crew wants you to lead the safety training tomorrow," he said. "Your experience could save lives." The sun was setting as William left the construction site, casting long shadows that reminded him of those early mornings outside the convenience store. But now, instead of dreading the coming night, he looked forward to returning to his room, to having a space of his own, to being able to plan for tomorrow. Robert Thompson was closing his store when William stopped by. The spot where he used to sit was now occupied by a young woman, talking earnestly with Linda Miller about job opportunities. William smiled, understanding that his story had become something bigger than himself. Let us know in the comments. Have you ever had a moment where something you thought was just a symbol of your past became a key to your future? Sometimes our greatest breakthroughs come from unexpected places. 1 month after the morning that changed everything, the Staples Center was buzzing with an energy that had nothing to do with basketball. William Anderson stood backstage, adjusting his tie, the Lakers tattoo on his arm now a badge of honor rather than a reminder of better days. Michael Davis stood beside him, beaming with pride. In just 1 month, William had not only excelled at his job but had also developed a training program for other workers transitioning out of homelessness. "You've done more than rebuild your life," Michael said. "You're helping others rebuild theirs." Barbara Williams from the Transitional Housing Center was there too, carrying a thick folder. Inside were the success stories that had followed Williams, 23 other homeless individuals who had found employment through the new community initiative sparked by Shaq's act of kindness. Robert Thompson had closed his convenience store early for the first time in 15 years to be there. "They need help? Let's talk." Table outside his store had become a symbol of hope in the neighborhood, leading to 47 job placements and 32 housing arrangements in just 1 month. Linda Miller and Patricia Harris had expanded their food program, now serving breakfast to anyone in need while connecting them with job opportunities. "It's amazing what happens," Linda said, "when you combine a meal with hope." The event about to unfold had been Shaq's idea. After seeing how William's story had inspired the community, he decided to turn one moment of kindness into a movement. Thomas Johnson, his assistant, had spent weeks organizing what they were calling the Recognition Project. Elizabeth Moore, now running the expanding Talent Bank program, watched as people filed into the arena. Among them were CEOs, community leaders, and most importantly, individuals who had been homeless until recently. The Lakers tattoo that had caught Shaq's attention had become a symbol of something much larger. Karen Miller, who had helped coordinate the event, checked her list one final time. 200 companies had signed up for the initiative, pledging to create opportunities for people rebuilding their lives. "This isn't charity," she explained to Richard Wilson, one of the participating business owners. "This is smart business, tapping into overlooked talent." The lights dimmed, and Sandra Johnson, whose blog post had first brought attention to William's story, took her seat in the press section. She wasn't just covering an event now, she was witnessing the culmination of a story that had started with a simple moment of human connection. Shaq stepped onto the stage, his presence commanding but his demeanor humble. "A month ago," he began, "I saw a man with a Lakers tattoo. But what I really saw was loyalty, resilience, and untapped potential. Today, we're here to recognize that those qualities exist in many others who just need a chance." William watched from the wings as Shaq introduced the initiative. The Lakers tattoo on his arm seemed to tingle as Shaq explained how that small detail had sparked a movement. "Sometimes," Shaq said, "the smallest signs lead us to the biggest truths." Jennifer Thompson, representing the Adult Education Center, presented the new certification program they had developed. Inspired by William's story, she explained, We've created a pathway that allows people to rebuild their professional credentials while working. 27 people have already enrolled. Joseph Robinson, who had learned from William at the construction site, stood with a group of other young workers. They were there to testify how working alongside someone who had overcome homelessness had changed their perspective. William taught us more than construction, Joseph said. He taught us about second chances. The atmosphere in the arena was electric as Shaq announced the numbers: 200 companies committed, 500 job placements promised, and $1 million fund established to support training and certification programs. But the real power was in the stories being shared. Dorothy Thompson took the stage to explain how the talent bank program had evolved. We've discovered doctors who lost everything to medical bills, engineers who ended up homeless after family tragedies, skilled workers who just needed a chance to prove themselves again, she said. These aren't just sad stories, they're opportunities waiting to happen. Anthony Garcia, the night clerk who had witnessed the transformation of the neighborhood, sat in the audience next to Susan Jackson. They watched as, one by one, people shared their stories of transformation. Each story traced back to that morning when Shaq had stopped to notice a Lakers tattoo. Mark Wilson, whose business had hired 5 people through the program, spoke about the impact on his company. These aren't just employees, he said. These are individuals who understand the value of opportunity, who bring perspective and determination that you can't teach. The highlight of the evening came when William finally stepped onto the stage. The Lakers tattoo was visible beneath his suit sleeve as he took the microphone. "A month ago," he began, "I was invisible. Today, I'm helping others become visible again." That's not just change, that's transformation. Nancy Martinez, covering the event for the local news, watched as William described the ripple effects of that first encounter. How one moment of recognition had sparked a movement of compassion. How a tattoo that represented his past loyalty to a team had become a symbol of his future impact on a community. Betty Moore listened from her seat as William announced the launch of a mentorship program. Those who had successfully transitioned out of homelessness would help guide others through the process. Because sometimes, William explained, the most powerful help comes from someone who has walked your path. The event concluded with a surprise announcement from Shaq. The Lakers organization, inspired by William's tattoo, would be creating a special recognition program. Each year, they would honor individuals who showed extraordinary resilience and community impact. The award would feature the same Lakers logo that had started it all. As the crowd filed out of the arena, the impact of the evening was evident in the conversations, the connections being made, the promises being exchanged. Robert Thompson overheard business owners discussing how they could replicate the "need help? Let's talk" table in their own neighborhoods. Linda Hernandez, who had shared her brother's story with William that first morning, was now coordinating similar programs in other communities. "It's amazing," she said, "how one genuine moment of connection can multiply into thousands." William stood outside the arena later that night, looking up at the stars. His Lakers tattoo, once a reminder of better days, had become a symbol of hope for others. Michael Davis joined him, talking about their plans to expand the training program to other construction companies. The neighborhood that had once walked past William without seeing him had become a model of community transformation. Barbara Williams had requests from 50 other cities wanting to learn from their example. "Sometimes," she said, "it takes just one person stopping to really see another human being." Shaq's final words that evening resonated through the arena and beyond. "We all wear marks of our loyalty, our struggles, our hopes. The question isn't whether these marks exist, it's whether we're willing to see them in each other, and more importantly, whether we're willing to do something about what we see." The story of the Lakers tattoo that changed lives continues to inspire others. It reminds us that sometimes the smallest details can lead to the biggest transformations, that every person carries signs of their worth if we only take the time to notice, and that true greatness isn't measured by what we achieve for ourselves, but by how we help others achieve their potential. Share your thoughts in the comments. What marks of loyalty, struggle, or hope do you carry? How could they become a bridge to helping others? Sometimes our greatest purpose is hidden in the details of our journey that we least expect.